Right now, there's a small blue dot glowing on a screen in your pocket. It knows exactly where you are. It knows which way to turn. It knows how far to go, and the precise second you've arrived. You don't even think about it anymore. Now take it away. Drop yourself into an unfamiliar forest with nothing in your hands. No dot, no signal, no line on a map. Within an hour, you'd be turning in slow circles, unsure which way you came from. But for 99% of human history, no one had a map, not a single soul. And your ancestors didn't just survive that. They crossed deserts, ice sheets, and open ocean, on foot, on rafts, for thousands of miles. And they did not get lost. So how did they always know which way was home? The answer is hiding inside your own skull right now. It's switched on, it's running. And almost no one alive today knows it's there. To understand this, we have to go back more than 60,000 years, long before the wheel, long before farming, to a world with no roads at all. Picture it. You're standing on an open plain, no signs, no trails. Just grass running flat to the horizon in every direction. To you, it's blank. To your ancestor, it's covered in writing. That low ridge is where the herds cross in the cold months. That faint smudge of trees means water, 2 days' walk to the east. That dark line of hills is where the stone for blades comes from. The land itself was the map, and they carried the whole thing in their heads. Anthropologists have lived alongside modern hunter-gatherer communities. They describe people who can name thousands of separate places. People who recall a single waterhole, visited once, decades earlier, and then point straight toward it from 100 miles away. They weren't following a route, they were reading a memory. And the part of the brain that stored that memory is the same part storing yours right now. Hold on to that. We're coming back to it. But the land you know always runs out. So what do you do when you reach country you've never seen, with nothing on it to recognize? You look up. The oldest compass in the world rises every morning in roughly the same quarter of the sky. It sets every evening on the opposite side, east and west, handed to you for free, once a day. At midday, in the northern world, the sun hangs to the south. Every shadow on the ground stretches the other way, a long dark needle laid across the earth, pointing north. Your ancestors were never taught this in a classroom. They absorbed it the way you still know which window in your home catches the morning light. You never check, you just know. That sense isn't useless trivia buried in you. It's the worn-down remains of a survival tool tens of thousands of years old. And when the sun finally goes down, that's when the real map switches on. At night, the whole sky becomes a slow, turning wheel. Every point of light fixed to it travels in a predictable arc. Learn the stars, and you hold a compass that works in total darkness. Particular stars rise at particular points on the horizon. They climb. They set in the same places, night after night, season after season. String them together in your memory, and you can hold one steady direction from dusk until dawn. But here is the part that should unsettle you. The North Star you would steer by tonight has not always been the North Star. The sky itself drifts, slowly. It grinds through a full cycle over many thousands of years. So the star that sits over true north keeps changing. Around 5,000 years ago, that role was held by a different star, called Thuban, which lay close to the celestial pole. Go deeper still, into the heart of the Ice Age, and no bright star sat over the pole at all. Your ancestors were navigating by a sky that no longer exists. Sun and stars are simple enough when you can see them. But what about thick fog? A blizzard? The howling inside of a sandstorm when the sky is gone and the world is one blank wall of gray? Then you read the ground. Wind is relentless. On open terrain, it blows from the same direction for months on end. And it leaves its signature on everything it touches. In deserts, it rakes the sand into long dunes that all lean the same way. A frozen arrow, miles wide, pointing where the wind has gone. On the ice, it does the same thing to packed snow. It carves it into hard, wave-like ridges. Peoples of the far north learned to read those ridges through the soles of their feet. They steered a dead straight line across a whiteout, where the ground and the sky have melted into one color and the eyes are useless. And there was more. Animal tracks ran toward water. Rivers always led somewhere. Moss on a tree, by the way, is a myth. It grows on whichever side stays damp, not reliably north, But the wind doesn't lie. The evening flight of birds pointed toward land, or toward roosts. Nothing in that world was background noise. Everything was a signal, if you'd been taught the language. Land is one challenge, but your ancestors did something that should not have been possible. They navigated across water they could not see the far side of. Look at a map of the world for a moment. To reach Australia, the very first people had to cross open ocean, and they did not do it by accident. The islands to its north were never joined to it by dry land. Even when Ice Age seas dropped more than 100 meters, there were still wide channels of deep water in the way. At least one stretch was close to 60 miles across. The far shore sat completely below the horizon. It was invisible from the beach they pushed off from, and people made that crossing anyway. The oldest evidence on the whole continent, from a rock shelter called Majid Bebi, points to humans arriving roughly 65,000 years ago, though the exact date is still debated. They aimed a simple raft at land they could not yet see, and they hit it. How is that even possible? We get our clearest window from Pacific Islander navigators, who kept this art alive into recent generations. They read the ocean itself like text. Long swells roll across the sea for thousands of miles. When they strike an island, they bend around it and bounce back off it in patterns. A trained navigator lies flat on his back in the bottom of the canoe. He feels those competing swells moving through the wooden hull against his spine, and from that alone, he senses an island still hidden far beyond eyesight. They followed the flight paths of seabirds at dawn and dusk. They watched for the faint green shimmer that a hidden lagoon throws onto the underside of a distant cloud. They even built charts from bent sticks and tied shells. Not maps of distance, maps of the living motion of the water. And here's the quiet truth in all of it. Your body still reads motion exactly the same way. The tiny organs deep in your inner ear that tell you which way is up are the same ones that, out on that ancient raft, were silently doing the math in the dark. But the single most powerful tool they carried wasn't the sun, it wasn't the stars, it wasn't the swell, it was a song. Across the Australian continent, people folded entire journeys into spoken verse, a route hundreds of miles long, every ridge, every soak of water, every turning, every danger, all of it woven, in order, into a song you could sing from beginning to end. Sing it correctly, in sequence, and it physically walked you across the land, landmark by landmark, like instructions playing in your own voice. These traditions are often called songlines. Some of them are thought to carry knowledge so old it may be among the longest continuous memory anywhere on Earth. Sit with what that actually means. The map wasn't drawn on anything. It wasn't an object you could drop, or burn, or have stolen. It lived inside the person, set to a melody, carried in the body itself. To travel was to remember, and to remember was to sing. And now we arrive at the part that has been hiding inside your skull this whole time. In 1971, a scientist named John O'Keefe, working in London, discovered cells in the brain that fire only when you stand in one specific place. They fall silent the instant you leave it. He called them place cells. Then, in 2005, two researchers, Edvard and May-Britt Moser, found another set of cells nearby. These cells throw an invisible grid out across the world around you, like graph paper draped over the ground. They called them grid cells. Together, the committee that awarded the discovery a Nobel Prize in 2014 described the system in plain words: an inner GPS. You were born with it. It is running inside your head as you listen to this. This is the exact machine your ancestors used to hold 1,000 miles of country in their minds. And here is the part that stings. Neuroscientists at University College London studied people who navigate for a living, day after day. They found that this region of the brain actually grows physically larger. It strengthens with use, like a muscle, which means it can also fade from neglect. So ask the question almost no one wants to ask. When you hand every single turn to the blue dot, when you stop looking up, stop tracking the sun, stop building the map yourself, what slowly happens to the instrument you never knew you were carrying? What if your hopeless sense of direction was never a flaw you were born with? What if it's an ancient skill you simply never switched on? Your ancestors read the night sky like a page of text. They felt the presence of islands through the soles of their feet. They carried whole continents folded inside a song, and they were never truly lost. You hold more raw knowledge in your pocket than any of them could have imagined in a lifetime. And most days, you couldn't walk out of an unfamiliar forest without it. We traded the sun, the swell, and the song for one small blue dot. And it was a good trade. Nobody forced it on us. We chose it, turn by turn, without ever feeling the weight of what we were setting down. But somewhere in the bargain, the map quietly moved from inside you to inside a machine. And almost no one noticed the moment it slipped away. So the next time that dot goes dark and the old animal fear begins to rise in your chest, remember this one thing. The part of you that always knew the way home was never in your hand. It was always in your head. You just stopped listening to it.